In the 16th century, a Portuguese widow inherited one of the largest fortunes in Europe. And how did she choose to use it? To rescue Jews from the Inquisition. This is History Makers, a series where I introduce you to the people who shaped and reshaped Jewish history. And our next history maker is Doña Gracia Mendes Nasi, known publicly as Beatriz de Luna Miquel. To understand why Gracia mattered, we need to understand the world into which she was born. I think it's fairly well-known Jewish history that in 1492 all Jews were expelled from Spain. Many fled next door to neighbouring Portugal, and for a few years Portugal became a refuge for Jews escaping the Spanish expulsion. Then in 1496, that came to a rather abrupt halt when King Manuel I of Portugal agreed to marry the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, the architects of the Spanish expulsion. But there was a condition. Portugal had to deal with its Jewish problem, as Ferdinand and Isabella saw it. So Manuel issued a decree ordering Jews and Muslims to leave the kingdom or convert. On paper, it looked very similar to the Spanish expulsion, but in practice, it was something else entirely. Many of Portugal's Jews were wealthy merchants, financiers, administrators, and skilled professionals, so losing them would have been enormously damaging to the kingdom's economy. So shortly after issuing the decree, Manuel effectively reversed course, and instead of allowing large numbers of Jews to leave, he prevented many from departing and ordered their mass conversion to Christianity. Thousands became what were known as New Christians or conversos. Officially they were Christians, but many privately remained Jews, and unlike the conversos of Spain, whose descendants often disappeared into wider Christian society, Portugal's New Christians developed a reputation for stubborn resistance. The memory of Judaism survived behind closed doors. Candles were lit in secret. Prayers were whispered. Pesach seders were held in cellars. Traditions were preserved. The authorities were bound to notice, though, and in 1506 a mob in Lisbon murdered thousands of conversos. In 1536, the Portuguese crown established the Portuguese Inquisition. Now the pressure became systematic. Families were investigated, property was confiscated, people were imprisoned, tortured, and executed on suspicion of secretly practicing Judaism. And that created a problem, not a theological problem, a logistical one. How do you help thousands of hidden Jews escape one of the most powerful kingdoms in Europe? The answer would come from a woman born into one of the wealthiest converso families in the world, Gracia Mendes Nasi. Born around 1510, she entered a family connected to the powerful Benveniste banking network, whose commercial ties stretched across Europe and beyond. Other famous family members include the famous rabbi known as Nachmanides. Publicly, she lived as Beatriz de Luna. Privately, she remained part of a Jewish family forced to conceal its identity. In 1538, her husband, who was also her uncle, Francisco Mendes, died, and he left behind a fortune built through banking, international trade, and the Portuguese spice market, especially peppercorn. And suddenly, at around 25 years old, Gracia found herself controlling one of the most powerful commercial networks in Europe. Most people in her position would have focused on protecting their wealth. Gracia used hers quite differently. From her family's base in Antwerp, beyond the immediate reach of the Portuguese Inquisition, she began helping conversos escape. This was not a symbolic effort. It was an organized operation using family ships, businesses, contacts, banking and commercial infrastructure. People were moved out of Portugal and into safer territory. Many arrived first in Antwerp. From there, Gracia's agents provided money, instructions, and connections for the next stage of the long journey. Some traveled south through Europe to Venice. Others eventually reached the Ottoman Empire, one of the few major powers where Jews could live openly as Jews. What Gracia built wasn't merely charity, it was a rescue network, an underground railroad of sorts. A trading empire became an escape route, A family business became a lifeline, and thousands benefited from it. Eventually, Gracia herself left Western Europe and settled in Constantinople, today's Istanbul. There she openly returned to Judaism and emerged as one of the most influential Jewish figures and figures in general in the Ottoman world. And this is why she's still remembered as a hero of Turkish history, not just Jewish history. She funded Jewish institutions, though, supported refugees, intervened diplomatically on behalf of persecuted Jewish communities. She even successfully pressured the papacy over the treatment of Jews in the Papal States, which was an extraordinary achievement for a Jewish woman living in the 16th century. But perhaps her most ambitious project lay elsewhere. In 1561, Gracia and her nephew Yosef Nasi received the right from Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent to settle and administer the region around Tiberias in Ottoman Palestine. At the time, Tiberias was a shadow of the city it had once been, yet it occupied a unique place in Jewish memory. It had been one of the greatest centers of rabbinic Judaism after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Jerusalem Talmud had been compiled there. The Masoretes, who preserved and standardized the Hebrew Bible, had worked there. And according to Jewish tradition, the Sanhedrin had spent its final years in the city before disappearing from history. Gracia saw an opportunity. She financed the rebuilding of the city walls. She encouraged Jewish settlement. She invested in economic development, including efforts to establish a silk industry that could provide employment and make the settlement financially sustainable. This was not simple philanthropy. In many ways, we could call it a proto-Zionism. Gracia was attempting to create a place where Jewish refugees could live openly as Jews under Jewish communal leadership in our ancestral homeland. Not merely survive, build. The project achieved only limited success in her lifetime, and it never attracted the numbers that she had hoped for. Yet the significance of the attempt was enormous. At a time when much of European Jewry was focused on escape, Gracia was thinking about reconstruction. At a time when countless Jews were searching for safety, she was trying to create permanence. Gracia died in 1569. By then, she had become one of the most powerful Jewish women in history. She wasn't a monarch. She wasn't a military commander. She wasn't a rabbi. But she understood something essential. Power is not only the ability to rule. Sometimes power is the ability to connect people, resources, and opportunity in ways that change what becomes possible. For thousands of conversos, she built a path back to Jewish life. For Jewish communities across the Ottoman world, she became a protector and patron. And in Tiberias, she attempted something even more ambitious, not simply rescuing Jews from danger, but helping rebuild a Jewish future. And that is why Doña Gracia Mendes Nasi is my latest history maker.